You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's discuss the killing of 23-year-old U.S. senior airman Roger Fortson. And you might have seen headlines about this one because there are two competing narratives out there. So let's just dive in. About 10 days ago, Roger was at his apartment in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, when at around 4:30 in the afternoon, a deputy knocked on his front door in response to a disturbance call. Okay, did you catch that? The deputy is knocking at his door to help intervene in a disturbance call, but he's alone. Now, Roger was inside the apartment on a FaceTime call with his girlfriend when the Okaloosa deputy knocked. So here's the first discrepancy in the stories. The sheriff of Okaloosa has publicly stated that the unnamed deputy knocked on the correct door. Attorneys representing Roger's family say that the deputy had the wrong door, wrong disturbance, wrong man completely. Well, in response to the community and Roger's family, the police body cam footage was released on Thursday, so that was nearly 1 week after the shooting. And here's what we learned. The deputy arrives at the apartment complex. Now, this complex is nice and clean, and everyone's pretty relaxed. There doesn't seem to be much tension. And the deputy initially speaks with a man in the lobby area of the complex. He says he really knows nothing except that police would be showing up. Then the deputy walks back out to the paved parking area and meets up with a woman who directs him to apartment 1401. Okay, here, give that part of the body cam footage a listen.
Or something? Okay.
But this kind of sounded like you were getting out of hand.
Okay, which door?
I'm not sure. 2 weeks ago, I was walking by their apartment basically on this side, and I was hearing someone yell like, "Shut the fuck up, you stupid B word," or something. I just snapped, like right after it, but I wasn't sure where it came from, and I couldn't call it. I didn't want to call the police.
Which room is it?
1401.
1401, okay.
1401. But the girl sounded scared, the one that called. She said, she was like saying that it sounds like it's getting really out of hand.
So it's hit number 4 now? Yeah. Okay. You fair, we stand up there and direct the deputy that's coming through this area?
It's not, you're going to go up to the fourth floor, and it's going to be on this side.
Gotcha.
So this female gives a very, very brief narrative about what she thinks is happening and getting out of hand in apartment 1401. She also says that a couple of weeks ago, she heard an argument through the walls that included vile language. Okay, I've cut out the next portion of the body cam footage because the deputy tells the woman to not follow him upstairs, and then he rides on the elevator and he finds his way to the apartment door. Now, when the deputy initially knocks, he does not announce who he is. He just knocks, and you can hear a dog bark inside. And then you hear a man and a woman talking, and the man can clearly be heard saying the word police. Okay, let's play the remainder of the video here.
Sheriff's office, open the door! Sheriff's office, open the door! Step out. Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! 312, shots fired. Suspect down. Do not move! 312, get EMS my location.
Now, as you heard, the deputy does announce that he is law enforcement. When Roger opens the door, he's holding his legally owned firearm at his side. The deputy reacts and yells, "Step back," and then shoots rapid fire. It all happens very, very quickly. As Roger is lying on the ground, wounded, he is able to tell the officer that he has dropped his firearm, and he says, "It's over there." EMS does arrive on scene, and Roger died from the wounds a short time later. Now, one complaint of the family is that the deputy really stays out of the view of the peephole on the apartment door. He never really stands in front of the door so that the occupant of the apartment can verify that law enforcement is truly the one knocking. But remember, there have been discrepancies in the stories. Earlier in the week, Benjamin Crump, that's the attorney representing Roger's family, well, Benjamin Crump said that the deputy had, quote, burst through the door. The video doesn't show that. But another discrepancy is that earlier in the week, the sheriff's department released a statement describing Roger as an armed man. Now, that is basically true. He had a gun in his hand, but it was not raised and pointed at the deputy. He also is in his own home with, as Crump keeps reiterating, a legally owned handgun. Crump said that Roger did what any other concerned, law-abiding citizen would do. Crump believes Roger was holding the gun because he could not see anyone in the peephole and he was protecting himself. Now, the sheriff disagrees and says that since the deputy announced himself twice after knocking, that Roger had awareness who was outside of his door. And the sheriff also pointed out that you can hear Roger say the word police in the body cam footage. So, did he know or didn't he know? I don't think that's ever going to be settled. We do have more video though. The girlfriend screen recorded the FaceTime call after the shooting. Can you even imagine? She has heard her boyfriend being shot and she has enough awareness to record the next few minutes. Now, in that recording, you can hear the deputy instructing Roger to not move. And you can also hear Roger moaning and claiming he can't breathe. EMS and backup arrive in the video and they begin life-saving measures. EMS is explaining in the video where the bullet wounds are. They say they've got 3 gunshot wounds and 1 has exited the body. You can also hear law enforcement saying, stay with me," to Roger. Law enforcement did yell during the initial portions of the body cam footage for anyone else in the apartment to come out and make themselves known, which the sheriff's office said explains that the deputy did not know Roger was alone in the apartment. Now, Crump has told Law and Crime that the death of Roger was an execution and that it also was a violation of Roger's constitutional rights to own a gun. Crump said that there is no question that the officer acted with impulse and that there was a lack of proper training when he shot and killed Roger within seconds of the door opening. Now, a probe is ongoing since multiple questions have yet to be answered by either side. Okay, like the obvious question. What was the origin of the complaint? Now, the 911 call or the non-emergency line call, well, that would explain some of this. From the police cam footage, we do hear the deputy communicating with dispatch. In that audio, you can hear dispatch relaying to the deputy that there is a physical disturbance in progress, and then the dispatcher gives the address to the apartment complex. So we do know that the deputy was at the right complex. But was it the wrong door? We also hear the dispatcher tell the deputy that all of the information they are receiving is fourth party, that the disturbance was relayed to the front desk and the front desk called in the disturbance. Also, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is going to handle the criminal investigation, and the deputy is on paid leave at this time. Now, that department will ultimately make the decision if the deputy's actions were justified or not. But there is another unanswered question. What was Roger doing that day before the police knocked on his door? Well, according to Crump, Roger had only been home about 30 minutes before the shooting, and he was playing video games before the deputy arrived. Okay, that most likely can be verified in the investigation since he was probably playing online. Now, Roger began active duty with the Air Force in November of 2019. I wish I had more information about him, but his obituary has yet to be released. I'll let you know as this case moves forward. And I feel like I wouldn't be telling you all that I know if I didn't remind you that this isn't the first time the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department has made headlines in the last few months. Okay, you might remember the story of Sheriff Deputy Jesse Hernandez. He was the officer who was walking back to his sheriff's official vehicle when he thought he had heard a shot fired at him, and he hid behind his car with his service weapon drawn and called for backup as he yelled, "Shots fired," multiple times. He truly believed he was being fired upon. Now, Deputy Hernandez had been settling a domestic dispute over a stolen car. The man involved in the dispute had been patted down and was in the back of the patrol car. As Deputy Hernandez was walking to the car to do a more thorough pat down or investigation of the suspect, he believed he was fired upon by the suspect in the car. And then after the investigation, it was discovered that the officer had actually heard an acorn fall from a tree and hit the roof of his patrol vehicle. He mistook the sound of the acorn for gunfire. Now, multiple shots were fired by the deputy and the sergeant at the scene. And before the investigation, Hernandez had taken to Facebook to describe the incident. He wrote the following: "All I could do was lean over and play dead to prevent getting shot in the head. I was scared to death, and I knew all I could depend on was God. I ignored everything, and I prayed." He then wrote he was blessed to not get hit by any bullets or get hurt physically, but mentally, he said, he wasn't okay. Now, Deputy Hernandez resigned from the department following the completion of the investigation and the figuring out that the actual sound was from the acorn. Now, that investigation showed that Deputy Hernandez had completed all of his required training and that he had been with the force for almost 2 years. He was found to have used force that was not reasonable. Deputy Hernandez faced no charges in the incident. And that man, the one that was accused of stealing the car and then was part of the domestic dispute, and then he was in the back of the patrol vehicle, and Jesse Hernandez thought that he was being fired on by that guy? Well, he was held at the county jail for several hours before being released. No charges were ever filed against him in this incident. All right, we're on trial watch with Karen Reed and Chad Daybell. I've been closely watching both, and I'll bring you updates when we have enough accumulated information. But there is another trial out there I have been paying attention to, and that's the Treadmill Murder. If you've seen the video, I sincerely apologize. I was so sick to my stomach when I first saw Christopher Greger forcing his 6-year-old son, Corey, to run at high speeds on a treadmill. In the video, you can see him berating the boy and forcing him to get on the treadmill and run at speeds his little body just can't endure. Corey is flung repeatedly off the treadmill in the video. I'm going to play the video for you. Turn away if you don't want to see it. Corey died days later from the trauma his little body had endured. And 31-year-old Chris Greger, well, he's on trial in New Jersey for first-degree murder and child endangerment. And I've been watching this case, and I had to bring you the update. Now, we need to do some background before we get into the case. Corey's parents, Chris and Brianna, they have never been married. Brianna had Corey when she was 17 years old, and when Corey was 4 years old, Brianna sought child support from Chris. Now, a paternity test was conducted, and it was determined that Corey was Chris's child. The adult difficulties in this death are tough. Brianna had previously suffered with an abuse problem. She had even temporarily lost custody of Corey, but that custody had been restored. Corey had lived with Chris's family during that time when she lost custody of her son. Now, back in March, Brianna said she had noticed what she thought was abuse on Corey. She alleges she saw an indentation-type bruise on Corey's forehead. Because of this, she had petitioned the courts for sole custody of Corey. That petition was denied on April 1st. All right, that date is important because in court on Thursday, Chris's mom testified about a conversation she had with her son on April 2nd of 2021. Okay, that's the day that Corey died in the hospital. Okay, here, give that testimony from Chris's mom a listen.
If you remember, did he tell you why he was taking Corey to the hospital?
Because he was lethargic. Something's wrong with him. Something's wrong. Has to take him. Took him to the hospital. My husband was at the dentist at the time. I called him to let him know something was going on. Get another phone call from Chris that, something's really wrong with him.
What time was that?
I don't know. I don't know.
You were still home in
I
Monroe?
was home.
Okay.
I was home.
In Monroe?
In Monroe. And the next phone call I receive, Chris is hysterical. What did she do to him? He's screaming on the phone. And I'm like, what's going on? And he tells me Corey passed. So I called my husband. I'm flipping out at the house. And my son Danny is home, my youngest. And I'm screaming. He comes, runs upstairs. What's going on? Thank God my husband came home very quickly after that. We got in the car and went down there. So we're calling Chris. I was so worried because he just was so adamant that something happened when he was with his mother. Something happened to him. So I said, Chris, don't go there. Don't go to their house. Don't, just please wait for us. So we left. As we're driving, my son calls me.
Which son? Yeah.
Daniel, my youngest. He was home by himself. I don't know how long after this was. He calls me. He's getting phone calls at the house. On our house phone. Threats. People are, your brother's a murderer. This was like, it was ridiculous how quickly.
So when you talk about...
Now, Chris's mother is testifying that Chris blamed the death of the boy on the boy's mother, Brianna. Now, earlier that day, on April 2nd of 2021, Chris had taken the child to the emergency room after Corey had been experiencing slurred speech in the morning hours. Okay, this all came down when Brianna had dropped Corey off for Chris to watch for a scheduled visit. Now, Corey was allegedly also vomiting and having difficulty breathing that morning. But get this, Chris didn't take him to the hospital in the morning hours when Corey had begun experiencing the symptoms. Chris waited until 4 p.m. and then he sought medical attention. Now, when Corey showed up at the ER, he was immediately intubated when he arrived, but it was just too late. He coded twice and he died about an hour later. An autopsy ruled his death to be a homicide. The autopsy report said Corey suffered blunt force trauma to his chest and abdomen. He had lacerations to both his liver and his heart. The report also noted other indications of chronic abuse. So, let's back up a little bit. There was a few days between the disgusting treadmill video and the death of Corey on April 2nd. And Corey's mother, Brianna, did have the boy back with her during that time. So the boy was going back and forth between the parents. Okay, so here's how that time frame played out. One day after the treadmill abuse, Brianna had called the New Jersey Division of Child Protection. As part of that process, Brianna sought medical care for Corey on April 1st. Okay, remember, that is one day before his death, and also the day her sole custody case was dismissed. But she didn't see just one medical team. She saw two different teams. Brianna initially had Corey visit a hospital. At that visit, they determined through blood tests that Corey was experiencing elevated white blood counts, and the doctors felt he might be suffering from sepsis. Brianna disagreed, and she took Corey, against medical advice, out of that hospital's care and to another medical facility. Now, during that second doctor's visit, Corey allegedly told doctors that his father had forced him to run on the treadmill because he was too fat. All right, you guys need to look at the pictures of little Corey. Corey is not fat. And if he was somehow suffering from childhood obesity, this is still abuse. Abuse is abuse. At that visit, Corey was discharged after meeting with a child abuse specialist. He went home with his mother, and the bruises had been noted by the specialist. Now, during all of this, Chris also called CPS himself and filed a report against Brianna. In that report, he made claims that Brianna was a drug addict and that Brianna's sister just got out of jail for drugs. Chris also told CPS that the boyfriend of Corey's maternal grandmother is a twice convicted felon. So there is so much here, so much back and forth between the biological parents that led up to Corey's death. Now, text messages between Brianna and her boyfriend show that on the day of Corey's death, she texted her boyfriend asking him to score her some meth. She admitted to that during the trial. She said she sent that text, but she said she did not use drugs that day. She said she was only trying to cope with her son's death, and she reached out to her boyfriend thinking that if she used some drugs, it would possibly numb the pain. Now, in the trial, there was potentially some more damning evidence against Chris, and that was introduced on Thursday. In that hour where Corey was intubated and dying in the ER, Chris left. He didn't just leave the room. He left the hospital in his car. He didn't even stick around while his child was receiving care. A nurse on Thursday testified that the boy died with only medical personnel by his side. The defense countered that testimony by showing video evidence that Chris was crying in the hallway of the hospital while his son was dying in the ER trauma room. Now, the nurse also testified that Chris told medical personnel that he did not want the mother of the child contacted because she was a drug addict and she needed to be kept away from the boy. On Thursday, we also learned as well that Chris's mother had tried to call him multiple times after the initial phone call about Corey's death, and he didn't pick up those calls. A police sergeant also testified that he attempted to call Chris during that time frame, but he did not answer his call either. Now, we've learned via trial evidence that at 6:10 on the day that Corey died, okay, that's just 1 hour after the death, that Chris made internet searches on his phone. He searched phrases like, "Can your phone be traced in airplane mode?" and "Can my car be tracked?" Now, there was more phone data evidence showed that someone using Chris's phone made searches one day after Corey died that had phrases like, "What causes a rise in blood sugar in white blood cells?" And then also another search that said, "Can eternal bleeding raise your blood sugar level?" The phone also had searches regarding gastrointestinal bleeding. All right, all of this is important because the defense is claiming that the boy did not die from blunt force trauma. They instead say he died from sepsis or potentially an internal blood infection. The cell phone data expert also testified that nearly 3,500 text messages had been deleted between Brianna and Chris. The cell phone data also revealed that Chris had set up a date with a woman for the night that Corey died. Chris took the time to text that woman at 4:44 p.m. on the day that Corey died, and he told her he didn't think he would make it that night because his son was in the hospital. When he sent that text, his son was intubated and dying. His son was pronounced dead 18 minutes later. Now there's more cell phone data. It also showed that Chris had fled the area following his son's death. The cell phone pings show that Chris traveled from New Jersey to the southwestern corner of Arkansas over the next 2 days. And you're probably wondering, if Chris is potentially guilty of the murder and the abuse, why didn't Chris destroy his phone or evidence on his phone? Well, that phone was seized when Chris was pulled over in Tennessee after he traveled to Arkansas. So investigators had it pretty quickly following the boy's death. Chris's defense attorney does not seem to be shying away from the idea that the treadmill video is disgusting. He said so in his opening arguments, but also in those opening statements, he telegraphed that Chris might have been outrageous with his son in that video, but that horrific behavior doesn't mean he killed his son, and it also doesn't mean the autopsy is correct. Now, the trial continues this week, and I'll be watching. Chris is being held in the Ocean County Jail. If he is convicted of murder, he would face up to 30 years without the possibility of parole, or maybe even life in prison. And for the child endangerment charge, he would face up to 10 years in prison. The jury could potentially find him guilty of the endangerment charge, but not guilty of the murder. I think we have to be aware of that because the treadmill video is so damning. I'll be watching and I'll let you know. And an update to a story I brought you on February 26th on Rise in Crime. This was the heartbreaking story of Harmony Montgomery, who was born in 2014. And that adorable little girl, well, she bounced in and out of foster homes since her biological parents were deemed unfit to care for Harmony. In 2018, her mother, Crystal Sorey, lost custody completely of Harmony, and that left her father, Adam, who suffered from substance abuse, to fight for custody and then eventually gain that custody in 2019. Crystal would check in with Harmony via FaceTime, but it wasn't often. After not seeing Harmony for 2.5 years, Crystal went to the police, who then, in 2021, began an investigation into Harmony's disappearance. Adam was initially charged with failure to provide a child to authorities. After lying to the grand jury and facing her own mounting pressures with the law, Adam's wife, Kayla, well, she went on to cut a deal with prosecutors to explain the details of how Harmony was murdered. I feel the need to remind you quickly that the adults in Harmony's life consist of a mother who didn't report her missing for over 2.5 years, an abusive father who had the family living homeless but could find enough money to purchase his drugs, and a stepmother who lied to authorities for months before finally telling her version of Harmony's death. Now, Kayla, the stepmother, she recounted to authorities that the family was living in their car and Adam was driving to Burger King to get dinner when he became angry with Harmony because she had soiled herself while they were in the car. From the driver's seat, Adam turned around and repeatedly punched Harmony in the neck and the face and the head until she was no longer responsive. Later that night, Adam admitted to Kayla that he went too far this time. For the next few months, Harmony's remains were moved from freezer to freezer, sometimes being transported by Kayla in a stroller, and then other times being stored in a restaurant freezer at Adam's work. Now, it was eventually believed that Adam disposed of Harmony's remains by transporting them in a U-Haul truck to a remote location, but the child is yet to be found. Adam was found guilty after the jury deliberated for 2 days a few months ago, and Adam, in a bizarre and cowardly twist, did not attend any of the days of the trial. Well, here's the update. On Thursday, 34-year-old Adam was sentenced to 56 years to life in prison. Here's the really strange part of the sentencing. Adam chose to face a longer prison sentence over disclosing where he hid the body of his murdered 5-year-old daughter. His sentence could have been reduced by 21 years if he had agreed to finally tell authorities and his family where he disposed of Harmony. But Adam sat stone-faced in the courtroom while his lawyers denied the reduction offer. Now, it's important to note that the 56 years is not just for the presumed death of Harmony. That sentence has weapons charges added to it. The actual sentence for Harmony's death is 45 years. Judge Amy Messer told Adam on Thursday that in light of the egregious nature of the crimes of which Adam had been convicted in this case, and also because she took into consideration that Adam has an extremely violent criminal history, well, she said the court found that the only way to keep other people safe was to keep Adam off the streets. Harmony's aunt, Brittany Sorey, was allowed to speak at the sentencing hearing, and she told Adam that he was a selfish, evil, conniving, poor excuse for a human being. She then told Adam that if he was any type of a man, or if he loved Harmony at all for just a second, he would tell everyone where she was. Now, of course, in true fashion, Harmony was forgotten by several adults in the room, and Adam's defense attorneys slammed the reduction offer by saying it was just a stunt to get a reaction out of Adam. Yeah, it sounds about right in this case that we wouldn't think about a slain 5-year-old at all, that we would only think about poor Adam and his reaction. Now, his attorney told the court that Adam maintains his innocence and that when he realized that Harmony had inexplicably died, that his bizarre behavior of moving the remains from place to place was simply because Adam was suffering from some grief, and that Adam eventually pulled himself together and said goodbye to his daughter when he moved the remains to the undisclosed location. All right, Harmony's biological mother, Crystal, well, she spoke at the sentencing hearing, and she told Adam that Harmony had a life worth living. She then told him that Harmony was nothing like Adam and everything like her, that she was funny and smart and sassy and loving, and that Adam was just insecure and paranoid. All right, one final note. The judge did place a no contact order for Adam. He will not be allowed to reach out to the Sorey family. And finally, let's finish with this crappy story. On Wednesday in a New Hampshire park, 18-year-old Aiden Struder did a filthy thing. Aiden had gotten into an argument with a mother and her 4-year-old daughter. And who knows what the argument was about, but the mother gathered up her child and walked to a porta potty in the park. It was then that Aiden allegedly pushed the porta potty over, toppling the portable toilet onto its front side, effectively trapping the mother and daughter inside because the door to the unit was facing the ground. The mother and the daughter were covered in fluids and feces, and they remained trapped until bystanders rushed to help the pair. When Manchester police arrived, Aiden allegedly continued his tirade and then eventually threw an object at the police before being arrested. He's been charged with 2 counts of criminal restraint and 2 counts of criminal mischief. He's also facing a simple assault charge on a police officer for throwing that object. Aiden didn't know the mother, so there was no background between the two. Well, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. On Wednesday, I'll be in Irvine, California for the Murder with My Husband live show. If you're attending, make sure you say hi. I'd also truly appreciate if you could like and subscribe to the podcast on all of the various platforms, and please leave a 5-star review if you're so inclined. They're greatly appreciated, and they really help Rise in Crime grow and also Oh No Media grow. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.